Mesopotamia, 9,500 years ago. The wild beast creeps into the village, lithe body slipping through the pooled shadows in search of prey. It slips under a gap in a building wall and smells the air. Grain and basketry, cut wood, human smells. Ooh, and something else. A sharp, musky tang of fur and feces. It's there, at the side of the basket, gnawing a hole in the reedwork. The predator watches as its prey freezes, realizing it's not alone. The beast pounces, slamming claws down on the creature to pin it, while its jaws clamp the wriggling form. But in the commotion, a field tool topples and clangs. Suddenly, a light. The beast now freezes. In ambushing, it has itself been ambushed. At the door of the barn, approaches a human. But this giant predator makes no move to pounce on the beast. Instead, it places a piece of meat on the floor. And that, Zoe, is how you historically came to live inside. As we kick off this historical tale, I wanted to let you know that our friends over at Hit Point Press are about to kick off their new Kickstarter for Humblewood Beyond the Canopy. Cat lovers unite! Cats are everywhere. And I mean, like, everywhere, and that is the way I like it. Seriously, thank you, patrons, for voting for this series. I've wanted to do this for so long. They're one of the most popular pets on Earth, kept on every continent except Antarctica. And I'm at least 90% sure that one of those research vessels down there does have a ship's cat. But, and I want to be careful how exactly I say this, cats are also weird. Heck yeah. Domestic cats, or Felis catus, evolved from the African wildcat, Felis silvestris libica, making them literally the descendants of those cats that helped police grain stores in ancient Mesopotamia. So yeah, Zoe, your genes go way back. In fact, in their millennia of interacting with humans, cats have been seen as everything from wild animals to barnyard helpers to companions, vermin, gods, and of course, tools of Satan. Yet, remember how I said you were all, like, kind of weird? Well, what I more meant was, cats are different from dogs. Shocking statement, I know. But what makes them so different is that cats are basically just cats and always have been. What I mean is, anatomically, they're still extremely similar to the wild cats from which they split, and their anatomy isn't as mutable through breeding as that of a dog. With a dog, you can take a wolf and basically make it anything from a Chihuahua to a Chinese crested to a Saint Bernard, fundamentally changing their size, length, types of coat, and face shapes. And if they crossbreed, they end up keeping some of those traits. But cats, by contrast, are extremely difficult to selectively breed, and all the changes are essentially cosmetic. If two cats of different breeds get together, generally they just make like a normal cat. Their genetics sort of reverting to the standard. And importantly, that standard, run-of-the-mill cat, has essentially been unchanged since it was domesticated 9,500 years ago. That's right, Zoe. You are pretty much the same as all of your ancestors, stretching back to the dawn of agriculture. And that's really unusual. It's like you and sharks, buddy. God's perfect immutable murder machines. Also, you're one of the few domesticated species that can successfully become feral again, something you remind me of all the time. Cats can essentially switch domestication on and off, which is very rare. Pigs being the only other domesticated animal we know that can do that, and we already did 2 episodes about how useful and destructive they can be. So with all of that in mind, that is why we are doing things a little bit differently in this series. See, since there are no main characters in this historical tale, and Zoe, since you're basically the same as cats throughout time, we wanted to make you the main character. And with the powers of science and mostly animation, we're going to zap you back in time to relive pivotal moments of your species' history. Starting with... Nope! Starting with the hunt. Long ago, cats were wild. The African wildcat specifically. Your ancestors, Zoe, spent their life stalking small prey, like birds, lizards, and rodents, in North Africa and the Middle East. Now, life was hard, but a well-adapted organism sometimes makes hard things look quite easy. And luckily, cats are ideally suited for their role in the food chain. They're excellent ambush predators and good at hiding from larger animals. Their supple bodies can worm into small places to escape or find food, while claws and excellent jumping and climbing skills can get them out of danger quick. They also naturally bury and hide their waste as to not attract predators. But here in Mesopotamia, they found the ideal hunting ground: village grain stores. Truly like a lion stalks a watering hole, wildcats realized they could return to these same locations night after night and regularly find rodents attracted by the baskets of grain. And the humans nearby decided to just let them. Because cats were not a source of food for humans, they didn't attack you unless you tried to pick them up, and they didn't infect the village with any diseases. So, why not just let them take care of the rat problem? In fact, it's possible that early agriculturalists even left food out to attract the cats once they'd been seen, to keep the cats coming back to help out. Due to this, it's sometimes said that cats domesticated themselves. Come on, everyone knows a cat that just sort of showed up and moved into a place, right? But that's only part of the story. Because you see, cats were far from the first small animals humans had domesticated for non-food uses like hunting or companionship. In fact, they were a relative newcomer. While cats were domesticated around 9,500 years ago, dogs may have been domesticated up to 30,000 years ago, and animals like boar, sheep, goats, and extinct types of cattle were domesticated around 11,000 years ago. Heck, we even have a 13,000-year-old burial of a fox and a human with both skeletons coated in red ochre and later moved, suggesting that we may have domesticated foxes before cats. So all that's to say, humans had a lot of experience at this point with how to domesticate wild animals, and they likely started using the same techniques on cats. They would have favored felines that were friendly and non-aggressive to people, but that also were good hunters. And they probably focused their attention on those which were best at communicating with humans, via body language or vocalizations like meows, wails, grunts, and purrs. In fact, one reason cats became as popular as they did, one of the main reasons we like them now, is that they're unusually good at telling us what they want. Very loudly, often at 4 a.m., "Ask me how I know." Though it should be noted that one of the chief ways of domesticating wild animals in the ancient world was to separate them from their mothers and raise them in human environments so their behavior was shaped to please humans. That really is what domestication actually entails, because a wild animal that learns to live with humans is tame, while one that is born into human care is domesticated. So, while it's true that cats to some extent did domesticate themselves, it really was probably more of a push-pull between humans and cats. And due to all of that, they were soon about to be considered a lot more than bouncers at the local rodent nightclub, for they were increasingly becoming companions to humans. Again, while they've always been semi-wild, cats are pretty ideally suited to life with humans. They're soft, affectionate, and often like to be touched. They emit calming noises when they're happy, and can't injure you too badly even if things go wrong. They're also great at getting out of the way when needed, so they work well in human households even if there are things like cooking fires. And crucially, they don't stink. They bathe themselves regularly and bury or otherwise hide their waste. And we actually know they were companion animals rather than strictly helper animals because of analysis on their bones. There are cat skeletons with worn-down teeth, suggesting they lived longer than they usually would in the wild, and testing of their bones shows us that they were consuming a significant amount of human food. Just treats for days, and they deserved them. Then there are the burials, with cats either specifically interred in a way humans did not treat domesticated livestock, or even interred with people. The most interesting of these is a 9,500-year-old burial site discovered in Cyprus, where a man was found next to a young African wildcat which had been killed and buried with him. Oh, Zozo, don't worry, I would never do that to you. Whoa, okay there, judgmental. I'll have you know that my health is fine, but also, yes, thank you for noticing. Anyway, that tells us two things. First, that this wildcat was a tame companion animal. And second, that the cat had traveled there by ship. How do we know that? Well, because Cyprus is an island where cats weren't native, and to get there would have meant the cat had to undergo a sea voyage. It's hard to imagine that happening with the cat hissing and spitting all over the place, so this was an animal considered precious enough to warrant taking even to the afterlife, and tame enough to not cut everyone to ribbons. Anyway, this trip to Cyprus seems to have been part of a larger effort to settle domesticated animals on the island, meaning that in addition to companions, mouse-hunting cats may have even been seen as one of the essential elements of agriculture, which is probably why the Egyptians loved them so much. Ancient Egypt famously adored cats, with households commonly keeping them as pets and venerating them as representatives of the gods that protected the household. They killed snakes and scorpions trying to get into the house, they chased birds out of the grain fields, and of course, they kept killing rats and mice. Cats of pharaohs were symbolic protectors of the royals, and were even known to eat from plates at the table, like people, while adorned in gold and jewels. Aw, you like all that adoration, don't you, Zoe? Oh, well, get ready, because it gets better. In some copies of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the sun god Ra is shown as a cat, and several prominent gods and goddesses had heads of a leopard, a cheetah, and in the case of the goddess Bastet, a lioness, at least at first. See, Bastet was a protective goddess, guarding against disease and evil spirits, as well as guarding the pharaohs and the sun god Ra. And that's how she stayed for about 2,000 years, until around 945 BCE or so, when she transitioned from being a lioness to having the head of a domestic cat. Now, this may have been a sort of melding with cat-headed protective amulets which were popular at the time, but it also somewhat softened Bastet. She became a little more domestic and personable, becoming more associated with pregnancy, motherhood, and fertility. Oh, and just to be clear, Bastet was massively popular. Not only did she become an extremely common god from this period until the Roman conquest, she actually had a whole city, Bubastis, named after her as the center of her cult. And during her festival, things got a bit wild. Now we know about that from no less a source than Herodotus, who claimed that each year 700,000 men and women flooded the city in a day of drunkenness and dancing, where children were banned because, the adults were busy. It appears that Bastet worshippers may have included a little bit of naughty stuff, possibly inspired by how female cats in heat will mate with multiple males. And though Herodotus is kind of, let's just say, a notorious exaggerator, some other sources do refer to this as the, quote, festival of drunkenness. But with all of that said, Zoe, just know that the Egyptians, through and through, loved their cats. Just loved them. Which is probably why they mummified them so much. It's true. We've found tens of thousands of mummified cats. These range from house cats who'd died, were mummified, and delivered to temples in Bubastis, to royal cats that had sculpted leather ears and semi-precious stones for eyes resting in carved stone sarcophagi. Then, of course, there were the cats killed as offerings, which became so common in Ptolemaic Egypt that an entire industry arose to specifically breed cats for sacrifice, mummify them, and present them to temples as offerings. They were often strangled or had their necks broken, were stuffed with dry sand and earth, then wrapped up before— Whoa, Zoe, are you okay there, bud? Yeah, I can see how ancient Egypt kind of seems like a mixed bag now. But you'll be happy to know that after the Roman conquest, that sort of thing pretty much got shut down. Bastet got merged with Isis, who the Romans enthusiastically adopted along with cats. Though, swinging that pendulum back again, to be fair, cats were not as well regarded in Rome as they were in Egypt. In fact, at one point, a Roman soldier triggered a diplomatic incident by killing a cat, causing an Egyptian crowd to beat him to death. But while they were not as favored in Roman territory, we do know that the Romans were responsible for spreading domestic cats across the imperial territory and into Europe. Because by about 100 AD, domestic cats were in Britain. And we know that due to one having walked across a ceramic roof tile while it was drying, preserving its footprints there. Domestic cats had gone global and carried some of their godlike senses with them. For Isis was a goddess of knowledge and magic, and as they spread, cats would themselves be increasingly associated with mysticism, the occult, and witchcraft. So, join us next time, where Zoe here travels back to the Middle Ages, when cats were, let's just say getting hot under the collar? Aw, don't worry, bud, that's all in the past. I mean, let's focus on some positivity in the feline future, okay? For instance, our friends over at Hit Point Press have actually added cats as playable species to their new world book, Humblewood Beyond the Canopy. Now, listen, extra historians, I'm not sure if you're aware of this by now, but there are two things that I interact with the most in this world. One is tabletop RPGs, and the other one is this floofball right here. So this kind of includes both of those, and I'm super excited to tell you about it. Humblewood Beyond the Canopy is a sequel to the award-winning Humblewood adventure for D&D 5e that I've been waiting for forever now, and it's hitting Kickstarter in just a few weeks. This gorgeous new standalone book takes your RPG out of the woods to discover the globe-trotting adventures across the continent of Weston. And it is just bursting at the seams with lore and locations you can just dive into. You can uncover frozen mysteries in the Crystal Expanse, ride the mighty Gargaths across the plains of the Fernveld, find a warm welcome in Warrens away from the tempest that shakes Stormcrag, and feel the pulse of nature in the verdant Tangle Wilds. And you get to explore it all as even more of your favorite creatures with brand new playable animal and bird ancestries inspired by parrots, geckos, badgers, and yes, of course, cats! Not to mention, this over 250-page tome includes tons of new backgrounds, classes, subclasses, spells, magic items, and even a complete campaign, all beautifully illustrated by incredibly talented human artists, aka no AI was using this damn thing, which you'll love to see. I have been a huge fan of Humblewood since the first book here, and I've played a bunch of games in it. I love it so much. It's so much fun, and I cannot wait to see what this new book brings to the Humblewood table. So if this sounds as up your alley as it is mine, definitely head to their Kickstarter page by clicking right here or visiting the link in the description, then sign up to be notified when the campaign goes live on April 8th. That way you'll have the best chance to snag all of these sweet early bird specials, no pun intended, before they are gone. Just do not take mine. I'm calling dibs on at least one of those packages. Once again, to take your gaming table beyond the canopy with Humblewood, click here. And then once you've rolled up your first little creature, why not check out our next video here? Okay, Zoe, I'm gonna say that Angela Valenciana, Arclight Games, Dominic Valenciana, Hunter C, Joseph Blame, Kuya Koi, Lotus Wolf, and Celiad's Architectures are the best legendary patrons. Relax!